Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of JewishDrinking.com, the show. And today, I, of course, am Kaplan, your host. And today we have Rabbi Avrahom Pressburger as a guest today, who's famous for creating KosherCraftBeercom years ago, 2016, several years ago.
Sure.
I'm very curious, as you know, hopefully other listeners, viewers, other folks out there are about the kosher craft beer scene, even just in the last few years, which I'm sure you would say it's changed, right? It's a dynamic, even I think even beyond the kosher stuff. Just anybody following craft beer the last handful of years recognizes that things have been changing.
Yeah, it's a constantly changing scene, which is what led me to start that website. It was under a pen name at first, so some might know me as Svi Abraham. For a few reasons, I did the pen name thing, but my real name is Avrahom Pressburger. And so that was the purpose, is that the industry itself, and that this was in 2016, where it wasn't as dynamic as it is now, and it was constantly evolving and changing to the point where I felt there was a need to address, and which led me to the creation and start of the Kosher Craft Beer website.
What are you drinking tonight?
So I'm actually drinking seltzer. I still got to drive tonight, so it's Wegmans Blackberry Tangerine. Wegmans is the way to go when it comes to seltzer.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm just drinking a Belgian Tripel that I homebrewed with a neighbor.
Oh, cool.
So just nothing fancy, just, locally brewed, within walking distance. Take us back in time, back into the time machine, 2016, the halcyon days of craft beer. So what was going on? What prompted you to create KosherCraftBeer.com?
Right. So at that point in my drinking stage, I was drinking a lot of Sam Adams. Still great beer. I just don't drink it as often as maybe I should have, or maybe they also changed some of their offerings. But Sam Adams, I live in New York, and Sam Adams is available in every grocery store that sells beer. They have Sam Adams. That's like when it comes to like high-end beers, like the people I'm acquainted with, it's either Stella Artois or Sam Adams. They don't really know much more than that, because that's what.
Are you talking about 2020 or 2016?
Talking about both.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm saying the average beer consumer where I live that didn't go down the rabbit hole of craft beer, and they want to drink something different than the regular macros. Those are really the choices. It's expanded a little bit in recent years, but that's what most of my friends are drinking. But back then, that's what I was drinking, a lot of Sam Adams. So Sam Adams, every quarter they release another variety pack, and the variety pack has our beers. It always has the core of Boston Lager. Now they started adding in a second offering of Sam 76. But they also have other seasonal one-off brews that are not available on the shelves, and many of them have flavors. So when it comes to flavors, a lot of
you mean adjunct flavors.
So they have added
as opposed to the flavors coming from the hops or from the yeast.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so
adjunct ingredients.
Yeah, they're adding flavors in. Whether it's a cherry, this is one of their flagships. I don't know if they still sell a cherry wheat, but they have that. They're throwing in all sorts of. They even have a chocolate Bach, which is kosher but dairy. So they have something different than the regular Boston Lager. And there was a point in time where some of them were not necessarily kosher certified. Recently, it hasn't been an issue, but back in 2016, it was. And you would have a variety pack with 6 beers, and maybe 1 or 2 of them weren't, especially if 2 of them weren't kosher or certified by the Star K, because the Star K is the kashrut agency that gives the certification on Sam Adams. And if one of them wasn't on that list, then people would get confused. Should I buy it? Half the beers aren't drinkable, or at least not recommended. So that's really what led me to open it up. I did my own research within the Star K organization, and like this, those are always the posts that got the most views, because people are in the grocery store, they search, is the variety pack kosher? This pops up, and so that was really the cause of what started it all.
That's really neat. And that's one of the things that makes it really fascinating for me to chat with you about, because I think your website is a good gauge for the last handful of years of what people are looking up. I mean, that's what people are Googling. They're landing on you. You clearly got, rose to the ranks in the SEO. But you're saying those posts were more, that's what people wanted to know.
Yep.
The kashrus concerns of Sam Adams.
Mm-hmm. So,
and
yeah.
part of it, of course, the distribution. It's one of the 3 biggest craft breweries in the country. Right?
Yeah. All right. So, and then from there it led to, some other things. I probably should open up in front of me because I don't even remember everything that I posted. And if you check the site now, I haven't posted, I think, since April of 2019. So it's been pretty bad, but I'm still getting the emails. So I set up this email address.
Yeah.
Anyone watching can hit me up. It's koshercraftbeer@gmail.com. It's very simple. So there are weeks I'll get multiple, then I'll go a couple weeks without getting any inquiries, but people ask me, sometimes it's a basic beer that just maybe not be on the list, or even if it's on a list. And other times people want to know about those beers it seems like all the craft beer drinkers are drinking, and this doesn't say anything about kosher. They Google, they don't find any information, and they end up on my site because it's kosher and beer, and then they ask me. So off the record, I'll tell people what I think, but when it comes to actually posting, I generally would stick to what is actually has the certification. Yes.
Yeah. So I looked through the 75 posts that are on KosherCraftBeer.com. At least as of today's recording. Maybe you'll go out tomorrow and start, posting more. Maybe I've got 80 now. So you mentioned a lot of the emails that you've received over the years that people are asking for. What are some of the more common questions that came your way? Whether it's beers, or was it about certain types of beers from like certain breweries? Was it certain styles of beer? Was it certain cautious questions, whether about wine barrel aging, adjunct flavors? Like what were common questions directly your way?
So it really runs the gamut of stuff. People ask me, someone will ask me, is a beer which might even be on a list, is that kosher certified? Then I'll just take a screenshot and then send it to them. Somebody actually recently asked me about a cognac or something. Like, I think it was a cognac. So I'm not I do drink occasionally hard alcohol, but I just took a screenshot from the Star K website and I sent it to him. He's very appreciative because people sometimes, I guess, don't have the searching capability, or just they don't have the knowledge that it's all there. However, so it's really, like I said, it's the gamut. Sometimes it's just like a basic question. Other times someone wants to know, listen, the beer is flavored. What should I do about that? And sometimes just, I picked up this beer, or my friend recommended this beer. It's, let's say, Founders Brewing. It's like a nice, like, power brewery that I bring up.
Which one?
Founders out of Michigan, Grand Rapids, Michigan. So can I drink Founders? They make this beer called All Day IPA. It's almost in all the grocery stores, almost as ubiquitous as Sam Adams these days. And can I buy that? So I'm like, Founders is a recommended brewery. It might not be on the kosher on any certified list by the agencies, but I'm telling you that it's a recommended brewery. You can drink Founders. And then someone will ask me about the banana peanut butter beer that the brewery is putting out. The brewery is based in California. And then I'll tell them, listen, I can't verify anything that goes in there, what exactly they're putting in. And if you're asking me, I would tell you to stay away from it. And then, yes, people have asked me about the barrel aged things as well. That does come up, and it's really across the spectrum.
And most of what you've posted and is about already what's been certified, and not how to ascertain, to try to figure out the various halachot of the kashrus of the beers. It's more of, this has already been certified. I'm just sharing this information what's been certified, right?
Right, yeah. There are a couple of posts. There's one post that I posted about Dogfish Head. I went on a little rant about that. What was that was there's a local restaurant that was serving the beer. This was to be clear, this was immediately after they released a nationally produced beer, which I actually went to a local shop and picked up the bottle in my hand like this. This wasn't some one-off in the brew pub. This was a nationally produced beer, which was produced with meatloaf.
How much, I mean, this could get into the weeds a little bit, but how much have you personally reached out to the breweries and asked them about how they clean their vessels after brewing?
So I'll give you an
That
example.
might be getting into the minutia, but I'm going to ask it.
Yeah, I'll tell you. There's an example of a different brewery that I reached out to that I asked them, are they kosher? And the response was, depends. This is from the brewery. Depends on your level of observance. I was like, whoa, yo, whoa.
You
He
must not
said,
have been the first person to ask.
yeah, I guess. So he says we made an oyster stout, but we do clean down in between with caustic, and it really, it depends on your level of observance, but everyone is to choose as what they decide. But what I have decided, and what I chose to post when I did discuss Dogfish Head, is that the caustic is not enough. But that's just my opinion.
That's a conversation for another time.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
But
So
the idea was when people find out that Dogfish brewed a beer on their main line, again, not many times you'll find out a brewery made a beer with oysters or bacon or some. I actually just saw a local brewery do something with squidding. They're doing these they're doing these they're doing these as one-offs. It doesn't necessarily affect the regular production line. Not assuming, potentially, if it is a problem, like you said, it can be a different discussion for a different time. But if it is a problem, these things are done on a much smaller pilot batch, which wouldn't affect the regular production. So that, as I was saying with Dogfish Head, they produced on their production facility this beer, which is called Beer for Breakfast. And as a side note, I actually saw on Twitter, I came across this because I occasionally search things on Twitter regarding beer and kosher. So there's a person venting frustration, saying how they weren't Jewish, but they were a vegan, and they were quite disappointed. They were at a restaurant, they were served beer for breakfast, and they found out that they actually drank beer with bacon in it. And the person was like putting a PSA out there, like all kosher and vegan drinkers, like beware. And this is a real concern because yes, maybe this is the reason why some of the agencies say to avoid these breweries, because not always does it say on the bottle oyster or bacon. This is just, it said beer for breakfast. So it seemed pretty innocuous, pretty innocent. And sitting in that beer, which I think every single rabbi would tell you, if there's bacon in there, that you can't drink it.
yeah, it's a no-go.
And
No,
it's not.
no halachic loopholes there.
Yeah, and you, yeah. So that's really, so obviously, so what happened was, in a local restaurant was serving not that beer, but he want one of the beers over there. And again, whether an individual drinker wants to, rely on things like caustic and things like that, that's up to them. But the agencies, usually, and I'm not going to mention which particular one this was, but they usually hold themselves to a higher standard. When I brought it up to them, originally, I walked in, I spoke to the mashgiach, and then I called them on the phone to try to blow me off until I had some friends who knew some higher ups. Scandal here, right?
Yeah.
I had some friends who knew some higher ups in that particular organization, and they were able to relay the information, and they pulled the beer from from the restaurant. It's like, I think, the only post where like I really went like and said what should be avoided. I didn't really get into anything else on that blog. And then there's one other post about a beer. It's actually another Founders beer, and it was made with raspberries. And I had actually a reader reach out to me through email, and he was the one who did all the research into it. And he found out, based on research, that the raspberries are pureed and could be made in the same facility as grapes. And then again, if there's a cleaning between, if there's not a cleaning between, and
Well, the grapes could have been but they could have been nullified. They could have been neat batel within all the bunches of raspberries.
Yeah, that again, these things are could be's, right? That's a thing. That's a good point, right? It's a good point, Rabbi Jew. This is what I tell people, right? There's let's forget about the beers which are kosher certified, which are very much available, whether it's a Sam Adams, whether it's New Belgium, which I think is almost in all 50 states by now, whether it's Shiner, which is very widely distributed, Schmalzbrewing, which you can find in the East and the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
There are many breweries, Founders, Bells, like Unitas, and you can, take these down if you're listening out there somewhere. There are many breweries out there that don't get involved in potential issues now. And even if some of these breweries, they might make a beer which is flavored. So I say, yeah, listen, maybe you could be right. Maybe there are no problems. Maybe, like you're saying, it's batel. Maybe the when they say they're putting in raspberries, they're not putting in a puree which might have added flavors to it. Maybe they're actually putting in the fresh thing or whatever the case may be. But until you know for certain, then then you can then if you until you know for certain, then just stay away from it. Now, some people are like, listen, I don't care about these problems. Then I said, okay, as you know, I would say, call a couple to you. You're welcome to do it as you please. But if you're asking me, and I'll tell you, I'll be the first one to tell you, I visited a brewery in pretty close to me. I wouldn't say it's local, but I happen to be in the area. And I spoke to one of the proprietors, and they were telling me how this beer was aged on peaches, and I'm like, peaches, like, you know, and she said, yeah, we took we took the pits out of all the peaches, and we sat the beer in the barrels with the peaches. It's a barrel aged peach sour beer, and I drank it. Now, if I would have seen this peach beer in the store, I wouldn't have bought it because even though it's a peach beer, right? And I actually just saw an article about the FDA, which is more regulated than the alcohol industry, and this is like this is one of the biggest points that I tell people is that natural flavors in food can be anything as long as it's natural. And now one might say like, oh, what could be the big deal? Strawberry natural flavor, but if there, and I actually heard one of the rabbis from one of the large kashrut organizations say that they knew of a case where they're taking the leftover of the cheese, the whey, one company, and they wanted to throw it out, and then they found another company who was able to make that taste like strawberries, and I kid you not, and they were going to use it as a strawberry flavor. Maybe it was a different fruit flavor, but they were going to do like a instead of the dairy company. Instead of the dairy company throwing out the whey or the lactose or whatever it was, they wanted to give it to this company, and then they're both under that same organization, and they were going to ask them if they can certify it as parv, and they said that, or in other words, non-dairy, and they said no, we can't certify it as non-dairy because we, as this organization, we hold that we maintain that it is dairy. But the point was here was this leftover from the cheese, the whey proteins or whatnot, and they're using it to they wanted to use it as a flavoring. Now, when anything says natural flavors, they really can put in anything. Now, without getting into any rabbit holes of kashrut, and this, if they're putting in something for flavor, then a lot of people will hold this a problem. Mm-hmm. And therefore, if it says natural flavoring, and that's again back to that's just in food, we don't really know what they're putting into it. And when it's beer, which is even less regulated, I have people come and tell me, how could they put shellfish in the beer? Aren't there, and then not say anything, aren't there allergen issues? You might find, and I've reached out to kosher companies, you might find a kosher company and a kosher certified food and will say trace of shellfish on it. And the reason is because it's 1 in a million part. They have to say something about allergen because the allergen laws are 1 in a million. But that's what the FDA, when it comes to the TTB, which is Tobacco and Trade Bureau, which runs the alcohol industry in America, when it comes to the laws, they're not concerned. I mean, maybe they are concerned, but there hasn't been any laws put in place. And to talk about grapes, I actually one time bought a beer. Yeah. I won't say which brand, but I bought a beer from one of the large breweries in America, and I picked up the bottle. Didn't say anything about being flavored, and only when I came back home and I was doing an online search of this beer, like I had never seen it before, I wanted to find out some information. Then I find out that there was grapes in the beer. Now we're not talking about grapes. This is like a wine beer hybrid, which is a problem of non-kosher wine in your beer. So these are, whenever it's a fruit flavored beer, these are always concerns, especially with the grapes.
I'm going to take this in a little bit direction, but you'll see how this connects. How much, since starting the website, have you been getting more into the kashrus of beers, or has that been an interest of yours? Not only finding the problematic aspects of the kashrut, but also the solutions. Meaning, just because something's in there doesn't mean it can't be with grapes or whatever. It can't be bottled or something like that.
Right. So, again, my policy towards myself is that unless I know something for certain, then I won't, I won't drink it. I'll say the beer on record. There's a brewery based in Maryland. It's called Flying Dog Brewery. They're very famous for a beer it's a Belgian IPA. It's called Raging, and I'm not going to say the second word, but it has to do with the dog. And it's a very well-known beer in the East Coast in America and in my area, And so they have made a beer. It's called Chesapeake Bay Oyster Stout. And I actually was in my local beer store, beer bottle shop where I pick up most of the beers that I drink, and they had it there. And this is an oyster beer. Now, this beer used to be, Flying Dog used to be on the not recommended list by the CRC, they said, which meaning they say to avoid it. And if you would inquire with them, they would say Oyster Stout. At one point, I don't remember exactly the date that beer disappeared off the list. So I sent an email to the person who runs that list, and he told me that he heard from another kashrut professional that it is bottled. And the amount of oysters they put in the Chesapeake Bay Oyster Stout, not to drink the Chesapeake Bay Oyster Stout, God forbid, that beer has oysters and that you can taste the oysters. Every single review that I've read of Oyster Stout says it's briny. So that's apparently a trait of oysters. So I would never, even if it's a small amount, but the beer itself is a problem. But when it comes to the vessels that it's made on, then yes. So they have came out and said clearly that Flying Dog is not a problem. And yeah, so to answer your question, so I have my own. I don't really like going down that without really knowing all the information. Which I one time reached out to a brewery. A brewery made a small batch beer with bacon. And I really didn't think it was a problem, but I wanted to do my own research, and their response was it's proprietary, whatever. They're not giving me that information. So if it was a kashrut agency, they might be able to get in, or they might be, it might be different. But as a consumer on my own, they're not giving me that information, so I just avoided that brewery entirely. Now, very well could be they put in one little sliver of bacon, and no one, obviously, again, that beer, stay away from in case they put in more than one sliver and it tastes like it, and whatever the case may be. But the next beer they're making after that would be totally bottled. You don't have to come on to caustic or any of the other things, but without knowing for certain, that's my policy. That's whenever people ask me, whether it's through my blog, through my website, and they email me, or people approach me, I have like acquaintances that know me from just day-to-day life, and then once they find out I'm the beer person, I got a text yesterday. Somebody wanted to know about Corona, actually. Corona, is Corona okay? So I said Corona's okay, but this was yesterday. I literally got a text yesterday. But when people ask me, I'm like, listen, everyone can do as they so choose, but this is my approach. So to answer that question in a roundabout way is that only up to what's known, what's out there. It's as a consumer without inside knowledge, it's very hard to get information. So it's really hard to go into individual case, and whether we're actually talking about hardcore problems with oysters and bacon, or maybe potential, we're not sure about some grapes, which grapes do have, they don't need to be nullified in 1/60th according to Moshe Feinstein. They can only be nullified in 1 1/6, which is a much easier way to, you can have much larger concentration of grapes and it can still become nitzbatel.
And the Shulchan Aruch. It's not just Rav Moshe. It's also the Shulchan Aruch, the 1/6.
Okay.
He didn't come up with it out of nowhere.
Yeah. So therefore, in that vein, if a brewery that I know does brew a beer with grapes, then I will drink other beers because of that reason, because of the 1/6.
Have you been in contact a lot with brewers?
So
have you developed relationships with brewers, or is it a bit more like reaching out to the breweries?
Yeah. So I haven't been able to develop any relationships. There is a couple local breweries that back when I used to have more time, I used to visit more often, and I never got to speak to the brewers, but with one of them, I got to speak to one of the people behind it. So there was a beer that was on tap that was made with some fruit. So I'm like, oh, John, his name was John. I'm like, what's in the fruit? And he told me where it's from. So I was able to, build up some sort of relationship with that person. But most of the time, it's just sending an email. A trick I found is, I'll send an email to a brewery. Hey, I'm vegan. And I'll use a pseudonym so they don't have to necessarily know that I'm Jewish, and I'm vegan, and I can't drink non-vegan beers. Are there any non-vegan beers that you make? So most of the time, the answer is yeah. We make a beer with honey, which surprisingly some might not know it's considered non-vegan because it comes from animals. As us kosher-keeping Jews, we don't have that issue with honey, so honey would be okay. But then some of them will tell me, yeah, we actually just made oyster stout, and then I would, then from there. So then sometimes you have to ask, and almost always the answer is yes. It's just on the pilot batch. So many of the times that a brewery is making an oyster stout, it's not really such a big concern. But one will have to ascertain that before deciding further.
In the last several years, have you seen certain trends or changes going on in the craft beer industry that have affected kashrut concerns?
The two biggest trends in the past couple of years that I've seen, and I used to be way more dialed into the craft beer industry, but recently I have a couple of life changes that I haven't been able to focus as much as I used to. But one of them is the hazy IPA craze, which started in the Northeast, especially in the New England area, and it's spread now to almost every brewery makes it unless they decide not to make an IPA. So that, as far as I know, there aren't any problems with that. But that did lead to another style of beer, which they call the milkshake IPA, which does have either lactose or I actually saw some, they actually put in cream cheese. Now,
wow.
So almost, I don't know, as someone who lives in the New York area, I personally only drink and use Chalav Yisrael. So I don't get into the it's dairy and kosher, though not actual Chalav Yisrael. But if someone like me, then that is a concern when there is milk and lactose and these type of things in the beer. Another big trend is something that they call there's imperial stouts with flavors. What do they call it again? Pastry
stouts.
Pastry stouts. So pastry stouts, like somebody actually, on this WhatsApp group that some of you might know about, somebody posted a beer was made with Twix in it. Now, Twix is kosher and it's dairy. So again, if somebody keeps calling salt, that would be a problem. But the idea is that they put in all sorts of pastry-like things into the beer. And
unfortunately, there are a lot of candies that are kosher chal stam.
Right. Yeah. So, but that's not always a candy, and you don't exactly know. A lot of times they're putting in a whole kitchen sink of stuff in there.
Yeah.
Look at there's other half in Brooklyn. They're one of the more well-known breweries. They make a lot of pastry stouts, a lot of hazy beers. I actually visited their brewery once in Brooklyn, but they used to be a very cult brewery. The only way to get their stuff was lining up. But now, over time, they're still considered a cult brewery. They don't distribute, as far as I know, but it has become easier to get their beers, and people trade, and that's something which goes on with the craft beer world. But I look at some of the beers they're putting out, and there's like 5-6 different added flavors in it, and it's just, to me, that's like something that's like it. I would have to ascertain each one specifically. They're putting in nuts, they're putting in bananas. Now these all sound fine, but are they actually putting it in? Are they putting in a puree or some other form of it, which individually might be not a problem at all. However, because it's just so many, and sometimes they're not so clear what exactly is going in. So I personally stay away from pastry stouts. So that would, would it make something treif? Not necessarily. No, it wouldn't make it treif, but it would, at least, yeah, potentially. Now, also there was a point in time that the CRC, which is a well-recognized kashrus organization, and they happen to do have a division that focuses on alcohol and the Star K, but not as much as much more than some of the other certification agencies. And there was a point in time where they said that all microbreweries might be a problem now for oyster beer because they have to find a way to stand out. But what I found with this hazy IPA trend is that everyone's running onto the haze train to the point where, like, if you're making hazy IPA, you don't have to. Obviously there's still these type of things. I told you, I just saw a squid IPA, but
yeah. Also, I mean, having spent time out in California and now Ohio, it seems to me that the oyster stuff is it's like a northeastern like style. I haven't seen it out in the Midwest. I haven't seen it out west. Mm-hmm. So, on the other hand, the haze craze is everywhere. That's taking off.
Yeah. So what I was saying was that helped in the sense that, like, being that it's a kosher beer, and that's what the breweries have to do now to make themselves stand out. So they're not going to go down some crazy, but there are always going to be a few breweries that are going to do some crazy things. There's a brewery in Colorado who the owner was John Hickenlooper, who recently was in the news because he was in contention for the Democratic nomination, which he since has dropped out. But it's his brewery, Winkup Brewery, I think that's how I pronounce it, Winkup or Winekup. They made a beer with Rocky Mountain oysters, which you might want to Google what that is.
That's a new one. That's a new adjunct.
Yeah. So that's always going to be some crazy stuff going down. But by and large, it's the beer industry, and I think there are close to 8,000 breweries in America now. I would say 90+% of them are staying away from any potential non-kosher ingredients. Yes, are they doing flavored beers? Yes. Is it possible to find out on a brewery to brewery level? I think almost all breweries you can actually try to find out, whether it's by making connections or just calling up and asking them, and sometimes they won't tell you. But when it comes to flavored beers, it is possible many times, but it has to be on a case-by-case level, which I can't do. Maybe if there's a real beer that interests me, really, for my personal preference. But if someone's going to ask me and it's flavored, I'm just going to tell them that I can't do more research just because I'm handicapped in my situation. I'm not busy with this all day, so I can spend hours trying to figure out what exactly they put into that beer.
I will say I've had more trouble finding out what's in beers talking to people in the brewery versus if I can talk to the brewer, him or herself. They're happy to share down to the micro ounce what they put in because they're proud and it's not proprietary. I mean, so many beer recipes are just even the breweries themselves will put it out online. They don't care that it's not really that proprietary.
Yeah.
Usually that's what I've found. You could literally ask them, they're happy to tell you everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found many breweries do post homebrew, scale down to 5-gallon homebrew recipes.
Yeah.
But there are some, and that refuse. So the famous one is Hetty Topper, out of Vermont, which many believe originated the haze craze. That was the first not clear. It's not on the level of haze as some of the hazy beers now. That was the first real non-clear IPA. There was always Hefeweizens, which were always known to be hazy and non-clear. But as on the IPA level, that was so many people at that point, back in 2014, 15, 16, when it was still cult status. That was the beer. That and Pliny the Elder out from the Russian River in California. Those are the two cult status beers back when I first started getting into craft beer. So there was always people talking about cloning them, and they never released that information. It was just a hopping. It was, it's a non-flavored beer. There's nothing about it. It's just the way they hop it. The different hops that they do at the different times. Because you mentioned something about homebrewing. I never homebrewed, but the hop additions, whether it's in the beginning of the boil, the end of the boil, sometimes they'll do it when it's already cold. They'll do a dry hop. So all those things can affect the way the hops give off the flavor.
What future plans do you have with your website? Aside from obviously posting this conversation.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Yeah. So I would love to say to post any updates which come up in the kosher craft beer world. I can't promise, unfortunately, due to the busy nature life has become. Thank God, whatever it may be, that I just have become busier, and I don't have as much time for my hobbies as I used to, as I would like. But ideally, would be to post updates here and there, whether it's the same variety pack situations that I started with, or whether it's there's actually a new brewery that just became kosher certified, which is in near Passaic, New Jersey, which I actually was thinking about doing a post about that. So that would be something which that would be something that I would post about. And the question really is to close off, is there really a market for breweries to become kosher certified? Because the Jewish drink, and I know with Scotch they've been successful. Whether it needs to be kosher certified or not is a totally different discussion. But you do see that Scotch has started having as much as Glenfiddich, or some people might say Glenfiddich, has some certification in some of their bottles. So the Scotch industry was affected by the Jews because Jews drink Scotch to the point where they noticed. The craft beer world, I wouldn't say the same. So
right. I don't even think they notice us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Pressburger, and L'chaim.
Chaim, with seltzer.